What's good? So, in my last video, we covered the general consensus of gear progression for Sorks, and in this video, we're going to cover specifically on the defensive gear aspect between full DR and full evasion. So let's talk about the hybrid build I showcased in the gear progression video with the Heaves, Muskins, and Beg's gloves. What was once a solid build strategy at one point in the game a while ago that has now since been below satisfactory for competitive standards. That reason being because of the increase of ways people could acquire even more accuracy in the game than ever before. We have accuracy earrings, rings, belt, not including add-ons, succession classes with more accuracy modifiers and even buffs, and the almighty accuracy offhand, aka the evasion killer. Because of this, the higher tier players out there with enough AP to afford the slight AP losses in return for a solid increase of accuracy can actually melt and shred through a lot of evasion builds out there with anywhere from 500 to 550 accuracy plus. In other words, you would have to go full evasion to try your best to withstand such accuracy certain players will have. The hybrid build basically sets you up the full evasion route, and whenever you feel you're ready to commit to that journey of full evasion PvP life, you can always swap the Begs goodbye and buy yourself Leaper's gloves. The hybrid build isn't the best and only really acts as your transition to evasion inevitably. Wouldn't necessarily take that to the end game. On the off chance though, you change your mind later on and decide you may not want to go evasion anymore. You still have Begs and you'd have to swap your helmet and shoes in the process. Some people tend to change their minds and sometimes become indecisive about what they want to build because of the 50-50 responses people get about which to go. So in other words, otherwise, if you know 100% exactly what you want to do, no reason to go hybrid since you would have chosen your path between the two. Usually if you play BDO, you're more than likely playing it because of how cool the PvP seemed, especially if you pick Sork. 9 out of 10 times people tend to gravitate towards the PvP side of the game with full evasion gear. There's plenty of people who set gear progression goals, and if they reach it, they will decide to go full PvP and not really grind or progress their gear at all from that point, and really only just war and shit. Of course, there are the PvE only players of Sork that don't really PvP that much and tend to just grind in life skill only, with the only PvP they do being duel for spots in the middle of their grind. In that case, I'll definitely optimize for full on PvE gear and work towards grinding at higher endgame spots. You can definitely go down the DR journey with Griffins, Urgons, and Beg's gloves. DR has always been a staple in the grinding category and is no exception for big time grinders as well. Dead God, of course, will be put in every build no matter what, but other pieces of gear will be pretty linear in terms of full DR or full evasion. The topic, of course, of Black Star pieces of armor is going to be saved for a different entire topic. So it's definitely best to figure out which route of BDO you wish to take. The full PvE life with DR gear that's still pretty decent in PvP as well, or the full competitive PvP player with full evasion gear. Once you figure out what path you plan to take, you can essentially just replace the gear in the gear progression guide with what DR or evasion gear you plan to get and go from there. Now let's talk about the topic of evasion versus DR when it comes to PvP. The good and the bad, and why some people might argue full evasion is not worth it anymore in today's high accuracy meta in the top player base. So the biggest argument people have against full evasion on Sork or full evasion in general or certain classes is the idea of how easy or easier it is to achieve such high accuracy to essentially shred evasion builds like butter, to the point where people will most likely reach high accuracy builds much quicker than it is for someone to get pin evasion with a good amount of Caphras invested into them. That even if you were to get somewhere to C6 or C9 full pin evasion, wouldn't take much for someone who has a shitload of AP and accuracy to swap his offhand, or maybe not, and completely negate their evasion as if it didn't exist and deal lots of damage to them. Because of that, people might say going full evasion is either not worth or a double-edged sword, where if you do face someone with loads of accuracy, your evasion will probably suffer, and if they don't have lots of accuracy, then your evasion will work wonders. Almost a high risk, high reward in a sense, but it would all end the same if you were full DR, since damage reduction and ship damage the more taken is may not be able to withstand the onslaught of damage some people have, and would ultimately end up killing us in the end if we get caught with both builds. It's the fact of DR being good in both PvP and PvE that people say it's much more worth going DR because of that. It's the idea of, well, I'm going to get shredded by accuracy fucks anyways, might as well go full DR in tankiness. At least that way I don't have to invest as much Caphras as the evasion build might have to in order to start working. Now, as much as that might be true, dealing with people who can shred evasion, technically it shouldn't matter whether they can shred you or not. In fact, if they can shred you, that is completely fine. As long as you can shred them and they can shred you, it's a fair game. Of course, if they can shred you and you can't even scratch them, then that's the problem. As long as you can kill each other, then it just comes down to skill and matchup in small fights or 1v1 scenarios. Whoever gets caught first dies. And in the event you're dealing with someone who doesn't have the accuracy to deal with your evasion, that's where you get the high reward of not only being somewhat unkillable, but also having the ability to kill them, borderline making it a one-sided fight. Evasion has its situation and benefits and can sometimes come in clutch when it comes to surviving shit in large-scale fights too. DR, of course, is great in PvE for sure, and even in PvP, it pretty much guarantees you what it offers in tankiness, and there's no question on that. Now, of course, if we're talking about super high endgame grind spots in PvE, full-powered pen evasion with almost capped Caphras does actually outperform DR. So DR is the best thing to go for PvE a grand majority of the grind spots, but even DR has its limits compared to what a full-powered evasion build can do. So it's kind of like this: if you do decide to go full evasion and you somehow manage to get your pen evasion way above C11 and it's a C20, that's when evasion starts to outperform DR in very endgame grind spots. Like if you were to make a hypothetical super endgame grind spot gear idea, you actually just do full like evasion pen with C20 as your idea. But of course, that's the catch. Most players don't play that long or even achieve such gear, which is why picking DR is their preference, but choosing the path of evasion does reward you in both PvP and PvE eventually if you manage to somehow get god levels of Caphras into your pen gears. There are definitely some good arguments for both, and there's no telling what will happen to the evasion and DR meta in the future, but at the moment it's still solid to go full DR in heavy PvE orientated gameplay with Griffins, Urgons, and Begs, and full evasion gear in competitive PvP with Heaves, Muskets, and Levers, or just full DR for both. As long as you have an idea of what you'll want to do in your future BDO journey, you can't go wrong going either or. Chances are actually you just might pick full DR, since most people who play the game tend to grind to get better gear so they can PvP, and they probably PvP when they're not grinding, and vice versa. Of course, if you want more gear, you'd have to grind, of course, and unless you barter your way to victory or any other life scaling method, you'll probably pick DR, since it will work for both your grind to acquire more gear and work well in tankiness for PvP. That is more or less the main reason most people would recommend and would want to keep DR as a whole. And the people who are currently in full evasion right now find no reason to swap, since it's working fine for them in wars and are already too heavily invested in evasion as it is. Unless, of course, they're not heavily invested in Caphras, then they would realistically have to just sell their pens and add a couple bill and buy pen replacement for whatever gear they're swapping to. If you wish to go full evasion, you have to keep in mind the time and effort it will take to get it working, and could backfire in some scenarios and equally reward you in others. So the transition to evasion may be pretty rocky for grinders at first compared to if they were full DR. But if you truly believe in the benefit and potential an evasion might have for you in the end game investment, then by all means go for it. Other than that, that's the general summary of going either full DR or full evasion and what they both offer you as a player and what your goals are. Just remember, hybrid builds only work and acts as an evasion transition that you'll commit to eventually. Otherwise, just keep your original DR gear and just enhance them to pen and Caphras them along your journey. Now, let me know if you guys are team evasion or team DR and why you think one is better than the other. Let me know in the comments below. That's pretty much just going to wrap up this video. And if you guys have any questions, of course, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.